Agnes received a disturbing email from New Zealand wine growers in Auckland.
At 26, Philip decided to do something about his hair loss horror when he saw a TV advert for Real Growth.
Parallel Imports told her it wouldn't be getting repaired or replaced.
For years, businesses have said to us, you always do stories about business ripping off consumers. Why not one about consumers ripping us off? And we've always said, no, not really our brief, but maybe one day. Well, that day's here. Consumers con businesses all the time, of course, on the flimsy justification that big business can cope with little losses. Tonight's investigation hopefully discourages that. Our story begins here, on the delightful Seyfrieds Estate vineyard in Nelson, an area far too attractive to be a victim of the sort of dodgy carry-on fair-go deals in. Owner Agnes Seyfried, originally a Southlander, came to these parts with her Austrian husband Herman and started up the first Nelson vineyard of the modern era, over 30 years ago.
In the early days it was hard going, but now that we're fairly well established, yeah, it's easier.
And maybe it was all those earlier years of hard work and risk that had Agnes writing to Fair Go over a relatively minor matter. It involved an email from a customer in Wellington.
After promoting and serving your wines for over 4 years in a well-established yacht club, I was extremely disappointed and embarrassed to find, after opening 2 bottles of your Chardonnay, both to be undrinkable. Could this be due to corkage or simply an error in storage by the supplier?
Yours sincerely, Hugh Mackenzie, and his Wellington address. Agnes, you were surprised, weren't you, by a complaint that 2 bottles of your Chardonnay were quote-unquote undrinkable. Why?
Because we hadn't had any problems that we were aware of with any of our Chardonnays. You know, we emailed him back and asked for a lot number, and maybe because we make a range of Chardonnays, which Chardonnay was causing the problem, and he emailed back to say that the wine had been, or the bottles had been disposed of, so he couldn't give me the lot numbers there. There was a question, I think, in his letter about the storage of the wine. That's not usually an issue. OK, this Hugh Mackenzie character replied and said that he had recycled the bottles, no longer had them, but he thought that they were Old Coach Road Chardonnay, vintage 2002, which surprised you even more. That surprised us because that particular wine had done particularly well for us in competitions and in cuisine tastings and the like, and was quite sought after.
Nonetheless, you sent Hugh Mackenzie 3 replacement bottles.
We sent 2 Old Coach Road, but we additionally sent a slightly more premium wine for the 3rd bottle, which were delivered a couple of days later.
Agnes, you sent those bottles even though Hugh Mackenzie wasn't able to provide you any proof that the original was undrinkable. Why did you do that?
It's just good customer service.
But just 2 days later, Agnes received a disturbing email from New Zealand wine growers in Auckland.
To all wineries. 5 wineries have received the following email from a hoax source complaining about wines. Please ignore it.
And wouldn't you know it, that email, sent to at least 5 other wineries, began...
After promoting and serving your wines for over 4 years in a well-established yacht club, I was extremely disappointed and embarrassed.
Everything in that email was word for word the same as the email Agnes got. What was your reaction?
I was disappointed. I was probably disappointed in myself for not finding out more about this person. But then, obviously, he's taking advantage of a number of wine companies and their goodwill, their customer service.
What do you want to happen?
Yeah, it would be interesting to see him on your program, Kevin.
Well, we'll find him for you, Agnes. I hope. Tracking down Hugh Mackenzie was not straightforward. As Agnes pointed out, no Hugh Mackenzie at the address given in the phone book, nor could we find anybody on the electoral roll by that name living anywhere near there. So to see who owned the house, we checked the address on the emails at TerraLink site on the net. It belonged to an older couple living in a nearby suburb, unlikely to be them. But when we checked the white pages again, this time under that couple's surname, a woman called Alice came up as living at the address Hugh Mackenzie had given. A daughter living in her parents' house, perhaps? But still no link to that name Hugh Mackenzie until we rang Alice's number.
Hi, Alice and Mackenzie can't take your call right now. Please leave a message.
Alice and Mackenzie? Was Mackenzie the Hugh Mackenzie we were looking for? Well, no, actually, but we had found our man, or woman, as it happens. Mackenzie Hugh turned out to be the first two names of Alice Tapp's 2-year-old son, and Alice admitted that, yes, she had been using the name Hugh Mackenzie in hoax emails to wine companies, quite successfully as it happens. The single mum says she got 3 bottles back from Tamania Estate, Vidal Estate, Tamata Estate, Kim Crawford, Esk Valley, Church Road and Sacred Hill. After some convincing, Alice Tapp agreed to front up to fair go, and I dropped over to see her. Hello. You're Alice?
Yep.
Kevin Milne.
Hi. You too.
Can we come in?
Good out.
Alice, you wrote those emails to the winemakers?
Yes, I did.
How many emails did you send out?
About 14.
How many winemakers responded by actually sending a wine?
8.
So you ended up with what, getting about 24 or so free bottles of wine?
About 16 to 20.
Okay, what did you do with the wine?
Had a few dinner parties, gave a few as gifts.
Okay. Alice, why did you do it?
A single mother, at home all day with a 2-year-old, plenty of time on my hands.
It was a prank in a way that kind of got out of hand because of its very success, really, didn't it?
Yeah, it was very easy. A lot of the vineyards sent out wine with no questions asked. Once the wine started turning up, it was very easy just to crack on and select a few more.
Do you accept now that you were dishonest?
Yes, I do.
You don't actually serve in a well-established yacht club?
No.
What are you going to do about it now?
I'm very prepared to apologise for what I've done to the vineyards and replace the wine.
Any advice to anyone who's contemplating this sort of thing with wine or any merchandise, really?
Basically, don't do it, and if you do it, expect to get caught. No such thing as a free lunch.
Or a free drink with it. Surely taking advantage of businesses trying to do their best by consumers, in the end, hurts just consumers. It puts up costs, and that's not a fair go for anyone. Coming up after the break, we see the result of this guy spending thousands on a hair restoring product.
You have to put aside at least 3 hours a day.
A family struggles to keep their livelihood going.
It was do or die.
So they go back to their roots.
Horses have played a big part of the history of this farm.
All of a sudden, we were there with a business.
The National Bank Country Calendar, Saturday on 1.
Very rarely do we hear from someone willing to talk on TV about being short of hair and being shortchanged trying to fix the problem. But next up, this 26-year-old who spent thousands on a treatment program that promised to regrow his hair or his money refunded. When we heard from him, he wasn't getting back either his hair or his money.
I start my morning with a herbal tablet, and then I have to take a prescription tablet, and then I need to put a solution on my head. And then at night I need to use a pre-treatment, shampoo, condition, and then after 1 hour I need to use another pre-treatment. Then an hour after that, apply the treatment solution. And then after waiting an hour for the solution to dry, I can finally go to bed.
Philip Shepherd's daily dose of potions, lotions and preening.
You have to put aside at least 3 hours a day.
is thanks to his lack of hair and his attempt to get it back with a hair regrowth program.
Well, I guess ever since I was young, my dad doesn't have a lot of hair and he's a little bit hairy too, so a lot of friends of mine used to tease me saying, yeah, you're going to end up bald and your hairy back, you know. A good friend of mine used to say it would be like cuddling a rug. But yeah, so that was initially what pushed me into it, I guess, was personal vanity and not wanting to end up like that and thinking if I can save myself, I will.
At 26, Philip decided to do something about his hair loss horror when he saw a TV advert for Real Growth, a treatment program for early stage hair loss from Australian medical hair centre Ashley and Martin.
A lot of companies claim to be able to regrow your hair. Why trust Ashley and Martin?
Why did you choose to go with this particular program?
It was, I guess, the money back guarantee. I could feel safe and confident that, yeah, it was a lot of money, but if it didn't work and I didn't get the results, that I would get my money back. It was satisfaction guaranteed. So, and with a 98% success rate, I thought, yeah, it'll work for me, or if it doesn't, I've got that little safety net.
Philip paid $3,200 for the 8-month Real Growth treatment program. During that period, he says he followed the regime religiously. So was all that time and money worth it?
Don't take my word for it. Have a look at the results.
No change at all. I've still got a balding patch at the back and a receding hairline at the front, which is what I started with.
And do we agree? Let's look at Philip's before and after shots. Ashley and Martin disagreed with Philip and refused to give him a refund.
They're saying there's been a good positive change and that I've achieved pretty much what I should have in that 8th month, and that, yeah, there is a positive result. They keep using the term positive result, not actually you've grown your hair back. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it looks the same as it was. It's 10 months now, so it looks the same as it was 10 months ago when I started.
How would you describe your experience with the Real Growth treatment program?
Pretty pissed off, I guess, is a polite way of putting it. I mean, I did what I said, and they haven't really done what they've said.
So Nats, Philip spends nearly 2 months trying to get his money back without success, then suddenly a breakthrough. What did his hair start growing all of a sudden?
Sadly not, but the medical hair centre Ashley and Martin made an abrupt about turn and agreed to a full refund, $3,200. Their medical director, Dr. Mario Terry, apologised for any misunderstandings. He said requests for refunds are unusual and any decision is normally made after studying a patient's file. But he said in Philip's case they'd pay up immediately.
Do you think the company genuinely misunderstood Philip's desire for a refund?
No, I don't think it was a case of misunderstanding. I think it simply came down to shabby customer service.
But the company came round in the end and paid up?
Yes, and in fairness, their decision to pay out was nothing to do with our involvement, though the speed with which they made the payment might have been. The money was in Philip's account the day after I contacted them.
Thanks, Natalie. And I've bought what's left of Philip's treatment at a very favourable rate. Now, a couple of updates. Perseverance has paid off for that Auckland family battling council red tape for more than 2 years. You first met Bill and Kitty Hodges on Fairgo in October last year. Kitty had bought her father's 90-year-old cottage with a view to restoring it, but it became obvious it was beyond saving, so they decided to demolish it.
To Bill and Kitty's astonishment, they weren't allowed to knock it down. The collapsing cottage was a Category A historic house. The couple thought this was crazy and took their case to an independent commissioner. They now got the news they so desperately wanted.
When we first visited the clapped-out cottage of Bill and Kitty Hodges, Bora holding hands appeared to be about the only thing holding it together. It was dark, it was dank, and the Hodges were at the end of their tether. But what a difference a few months and a commissioner's hearing make. It's no longer dark, largely because when we visited, the roof had been removed, and soon it will no longer be anything. It's being removed board by rotten board.
Finally, it's coming down. Great. Finally, we've won.
29 months has come to an end, and that we have had a resolution and sanity has prevailed.
The Hodges are going to build their new home just behind the old cottage. While it's going to be history, at least some parts of the home Kitty's grandfather lived in will live on.
It's all very, very poor written. We hope to save more than we can, but everything is going to be hand-picked over and sorted by professionals to know exactly what we can reuse into the house.
Bill and Kitty are hoping to start building next month.
And from a house bowled over to the hopes of some churchgoers hit for 6. Last month we ran a story on locals from Kaiawa near Thames trying to stop the Presbyterian Church selling their church. The locals said their donations and work since the late 60s when the church was built meant the Presbyterian Church had no right to sell. But the Presbyterians said because their name was on the title, they had every right. And they wanted to sell so they could build a bigger church at Mangatangi, 14 kilometres away.
Well, it's all bad news for the protesting churchgoers, I'm afraid. The Presbyterians have pushed ahead and sold the church. Sue Painting, who led the fight to keep Kaiawa's church, tells us, yes, the Presbyterian Church was the legal owner, but someone had to be, and our community trusted them to take care of our property. What a mistake.
Interesting issue, that. After the break, what you should know before buying parallel imports.
I've paid $220 for 2 watches, neither of which work.
There was a lot of talk about the pros and cons of parallel imports a decade or so ago. Remember all the fuss when the warehouse started parallel importing whiteware? Well, parallel imports are pouring into the country now, all shapes and sizes, and there are stores dedicated to selling it. But while the prices are right, what do you do when the goods go wrong? Greg with a case in point.
Annette Lee, that's her coming out of the water now, takes her triathlon training pretty seriously. And to do that, you've got to have good gear. Good shoes, a good bike, and less obviously, a sports watch, one of the flash ones with a heart rate monitor on it.
A Nike Imara is the watch in question.
My husband bought me the Nike sports watch in October of last year. He paid $219 from Parallel Imports on the North Shore because I needed it for the Tauranga Half Ironman in January.
And for a month, this watch worked just fine. But then Annette noticed when she was swimming, it was starting to fog up. And because swimming with one arm out of the water wasn't really an option, she decided to take the watch back to Parallel Imports.
Parallel Imports sent it to their repair centre and eventually gave me a replacement watch. It arrived on the Tuesday, but the knob fell off on the Thursday whilst I was swimming and water got in. You can guess the rest.
And then things get really silly. It was after Annette took that second watch back that Parallel Imports told her it wouldn't be getting repaired or replaced. Why? Well, get this, they said that sports watch had a scratch on it.
Annette says that's not true. Mind you, even if it were, you'd think a sports watch could take a wee bit of punishment. The shop manager suggested Annette buy a third watch at a reduced price. Annette suggested he jump in a lake.
So I got sick of it all. I decided to take them to the disputes tribunal. I won, and they had to pay me back in full within 7 days.
So, just to recap here, Parallel Imports are no longer talking to Annette. She went to Nike just to see what they had to say about it all. They said, well, it's a Parallel imported watch, so it's not really our responsibility.
More formally, Nike writes if the retailer purchased faulty Nike goods overseas, imports them and sells them in New Zealand, then it is that retailer who has the first responsibility to the person to whom they have sold the goods.
None of which is any use to Annette.
So basically, I've paid $220 for 2 watches, neither of which work. I've been messed around by Parallel Imports and Nike. And guess what? This is a $20 watch from the warehouse, and it's seen me through the whole season. So go figure.
Just to clarify, the company involved is Parallel Imported Limited, not Parallel Imports, as everybody seems to call them. Greg, what does the company have to say about it all?
Well, right up until Easter, they were saying that Annette had misused the watch, so they weren't going to replace or refund.
A change of heart over the holidays, though.
They had a good Easter, apparently. We got a statement today from Parallel Imported, and it appears they've had a rethink. Basically, they say they were wrong in refusing Annette's claim and are now offering her a full refund plus a new flasher watch. The Nike Imara watch, which Annette bought, has now been withdrawn from sale from Parallel Imported shops. So a good outcome for Annette at last, but not before time.
Yeah, great outcome for Annette. Good news for her. But what's the situation generally if you buy parallel imports from any store?
Well, you have the same legal rights with parallel imports as you do any other goods. In other words, if there's a big problem with the goods, the store has to fix or replace, and within a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, but do they do that in practice?
Well, they say they do, but the problem is that parallel imported stores won't get any cooperation with the manufacturers' agents in this country, so it may take a bit longer to get stuff repaired. It'll probably have to go offshore.
You know how normally in law, if you're getting no luck from the retailer, you can then go the manufacturer. Does that also apply to parallel imports?
Well, yeah, in law it does. Under the Consumer Guarantees Act, you have recourse to the manufacturer or their agents if the retailer's not fixing the problem. But in reality, there's no love lost between the big multinational manufacturers and parallel importers, so you're in for a lot of hassle if you want Nike, for example, to replace one of their products sold by a parallel importer.
So I guess, summing up, you get stuff cheaper from the parallel importers, but if things go wrong with it, it's not as simple to sort out. Thanks, Greg. Now, to our watch on the battle over this Blenheim couple, Ian and Ann Mitchell, getting a $60,000 Meridian power bill.
Meridian said they had undercharged the Mitchells for 7 years because of a misread power meter. Meridian told us that they would negotiate with the Mitchells to try and reach some sort of settlement.
There's going to be a deal done. We will talk to them. We will arrive at a conclusion that will be satisfactory to both parties. And what that might be, though, I don't want to preempt.
Well, we've since heard that Meridian still wants the Mitchells to pay up $30,000, half the original bill, yes, but Meridian says they feel that's a reasonable offer and reflects Meridian's measure of fault. Ian and Ann Mitchell, though, tell us $30,000 is a long way off a deal that's satisfactory to both parties. They say it might be satisfactory to Meridian, but it's certainly not to them. We'll keep you posted.
And that's us for this week. Keep your mail coming in. But if you're a business and you want to complain about a consumer, don't get ideas from what you saw earlier. We do those stories very rarely. See ya.
We ask how clean is your house in the Waitakere foothills next on 1. Over on TV2, Joey's catching up with an old best friend.